Welcome. I'm Cheryl Mitchell, the president of Treleven, a retreat and learning center located on a sheep farm here in Addison County. We work at the intersection of spirit, nature, and social justice, and I'm thrilled to have a chance to talk today with Beatrice Parwatiker, who's lived in our community for a long, long time and is, to my mind, the most amazing embodiment of letting your values drive what you do in the world. So, Beatrice, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I thought maybe we could start. You've worked with, and still do, with so many organizations, but Pax Christi and organizations that work for peace are central to your work.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your history. Where does your drive to do peace work come from?
I'm old enough that I can expose this, but as a child, I lived an abusive life. And it was never a feeling of peace, and it was terror. And when I finally got to a point where I started out the civil rights movement, I was still young, but I found a lot of people there and it was working. But then I began to realize I never wanted anyone to feel terror. And terror is it, and as I've traveled the world in different places and talked to people, it is a common denominator that people feel. They feel terror from someone else that's going to hurt them. They feel terror that they don't have enough food. They feel terror if they don't have housing. They feel terror. People who don't have the money to get their kids treated at a medical center. It's a feeling of terror.
Yeah.
And that is what drives me. I never want anyone to feel that. And working on that, I'm sensible enough to know I'm not going to eradicate everybody's feeling of terror. But once I realized that to create peace, any type of work, I needed to instill peace in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that required me to first work on myself. I was doing work outside before I really worked on myself. And then I had a time where my children came along and I did little things like soup lines, different things, programs like that, local things. And then I decided I really worked on myself and out of that came this desire to know that I must continue to move on and not stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I started. And Pax Christi is the Catholic movement for peace and justice. It was formed after World War II by two women in France
By two women, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
And a priest. And the women said, never again.
Yeah.
And it was not in the United States. And that was where it started, and then eventually it spread through Europe, and then it came to the United States. It's still an international movement as well, which is based in Brussels. I continue to work with them and grow with them, and out of that we have moved always against nuclear weapons, always against war, against poverty, and eventually they have started working on race because they realize that is a place, particularly in the United States, where it is a much condition of terror.
Yeah.
And I think in the interesting thing, we're kind of like, we won't admit it, but we're kind of like South Africa. Because what happened is, in South Africa, people who were white, who thought about it, they also felt trapped. And I think without realizing, lots of white people feel trapped. Yes, African Americans feel trapped and feel that their story is not told and is not a part of this history. But same as white people are beginning to understand, they did not know the real story of the United States.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, they're also trapped. And I think to move forward as a country, we need to move forward in dealing with racism. That is so important.
Mm-hmm.
From that point, I was working with Pax Christi, and I had gone to a conference at the United Nations in Vienna for preparation for the World Women's Conference in Beijing. And these African women said to me, you must two things they told me I need to work on. You must work on landmines, they said, and you must work on the debt issue. Landmines was easy. I can understand that right away. You know, you step on that, you lose a leg. I got it. You know, I wasn't. But this debt relief thing was very difficult at first for me to wrap my mind around it. And they said to me, my sister, you must go back and work on this. Our men are at fault. They take the money and buy weapons, but your men give the money. You must find a way to stop them. Mm-hmm. Coming back with that line of information, I went into further study of it. Joined Break the Debt, 50 Years Was Enough, and eventually rolled into, I was one of the founding members of Pax Christi USA. And rolling into that. And I was actually the representative for Vermont area. And we talked about this and tried to figure out ways. The idea, originally it was called Jubilee 2000 because we were in the 90s, late 90s, and we thought 2000, you know, we're aiming for that. Well, 2000 came and went, and we still did not have debt relief. So it became eventually Jubilee USA, there's Jubilee Europe, Jubilee Africa, Jubilee Latin America, and we have groups in Asia, and now we have Jubilee the Caribbean because they were so in need of their own organization to speak for their own needs. It is, I believe this all comes and radiates out of peace because people, water for instance, about roughly 15 years ago, the UN was saying, around this time and later, we're going to have wars over water because there's not going to be enough water.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that. Whether we like it or not, even the U.S. military is aware we're going to have war over climate change because people losing their land and not having a place to grow food. Do you really think people are going to stay there? They're going to move. And the only place they can move is north. And they're going to move there, and people are going, no one is going to just let their children starve. And that is what we have to face. There are so many things. So many of these issues are, to me, peace. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot, again, go to bed without that terror inside. And that's what it is for me.
And you have this remarkable ability, I think. I mean, I met you working with migrant workers here in the county to relate directly to individuals and understand what it is that they need and help with that. And also, I had really not heard about Jubilee or the concept of debt relief for developing nations. And I'm just curious, how do those two things, how do you keep them both going at the same time?
Well, I'm going to bring you back to, I met a Maori woman. We had a conference in the Pacific, and she came from Australia. And she said, I always ask when someone comes to do international work, what are you doing in your community? Because don't come over here telling me what to do while you pass your own community.
Yeah.
And she has a valid point, because what it means is it's easier for you to do work afar.
To see what other people are doing around.
Yes, and then to, maybe take the neighbor down the street to the hospital or the doctor. That's harder. Mm-hmm. So that is how it came about. To me, I always look wherever I am, who is in need? Who needs my help? And what ability do I have that will help that? Because not every issue you have the ability to work with. I see tons of issues. But I felt as if the migrant workers was someone I understood. I knew the trafficking, I knew what was going on. I knew coming out of it, a lot of the problems was debt issues that was sending them out of their country. And farming, and I knew the violence that was there. So I understood that these people were desperately in need and they needed our support and help. And so that was easy for me to connect to the work I was doing.
And the helping people to understand the bigger picture is also something. You think that somebody who lives in Shoreham, Vermont, how are you going to understand what's going on in the world? And yet you understand so many things, and you're able to make a difference from a place here in Vermont. And I'm just curious about how does that happen?
Well, it was kind of interesting because when I first came, which was 1998, and I live in Shoreham, Vermont, which has farms, dairy farms mainly. And farmers asked me, so what do you do? So I explained to them, and right off the bat, they said, oh, it's kind of like what the government does when they ask us to take bigger loans, and we do this. And it was right. They understood it.
Yeah.
They got it.
Yeah.
They got it immediately. I said, that's exactly it. And it is, it's an interesting thing in the loan industry, this international loans. What happens is when you have them sitting around the table at the World Bank, one of the countries might say, I have a lot of cement. Maybe they should build a airport, and they don't really want an airport, but they're not going to get the other money if they don't take that cement.
Yeah.
And so they'll give them the money, and part of the loan will be they will loan them the money to pay for the cement. So there you are, they are taking debts. There's one person in Africa who is an economist, and he says, my country took a loan, we have paid off that loan 3 times over in interest, and we still owe the loan. And that's what happens. Most of them. And the key thing is, I look at the country as a family. So what happens is, like all families, if you are strapped for money, you make some decisions. And you cut out, things might be needed, but you say, okay, we need food. We need some kind of roof over our head. It may not be a great one, but we'll have something. But we'll cut out medical care for the family. We'll cut out education for the children. We will delay things clothes and things. And that's exactly what the countries do.
Yeah.
So that was the reason we worked so hard after the Ebola crisis in West Africa. Because it was proven that because they didn't have clinics, that's why it spread so quickly. So we asked for debt, and that was a major debt relief. We got $5 million in debt.
And you were also, Jubilee was also successful in getting debt relief for, was it Puerto Rico?
We're still working
on
on
that
Puerto Rico. I mean, it's kind of interesting, Eric, our director, when I asked the Archbishop of Puerto Rico, when is the locust coming? Because they have locusts in Africa, but every time we turn around, there's another thing. I mean, it's an earthquake. It's just amazing the things that have happened. So you can't really stabilize it almost because of this. One of the things that is fascinating is like when they had the hurricane in Haiti. Haiti had all this money, and everyone thought, they're going to be fine. But what happens is when you get money, everyone you owe comes in and get their money first.
Yeah.
And they get it with interest. So what we were able to do is reduce them down a third of what they would have got.
Yeah.
So this is the type of thing, and as I said, it's amazing to me that ordinary people will work in something like Pax Christi, and they will work continuously to work on peace issues, find them, support them, watch the military budget. These are the interesting things. People will watch these military budgets. I, for one, always used to download the military budget because I wanted to see exactly where the money went.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an interesting sell. They're sold to the public as it is for the soldiers, and it is not. It is mainly for research and development.
The
So-
money that's given.
Yeah, so that's the bulk of the money. And that's going to big companies, to universities, and things like that.
So one of the other things that you were involved in that I'm curious about, I think you went as to watch the elections in South Africa.
No, I went
Is
to
it-
watch the election in El Salvador.
In El Salvador.
Yes.
And will some country come and watch our elections? What?
We did, Christi did that one year as kind of after the whole incident that happened in Florida.
Yeah.
So we brought in Christi members, and people came from other countries, and they went to Florida to watch because remember it was Florida, and they got very upset, But it is a possibility that we maybe not having international people, but we should have people on the elections who are representing different groups and seeing that this is happening to see if you have a fair election, if people are getting, we know that people get turned away, if people are getting in, if they've been on the line so many hours that election place should stay open. These are things, and I think in areas where this has been a problem, I think we should have people on there, people who work in different organizations.
I like your idea of bringing together people across different organizations
Yes.
and different points of view. And
Yes.
it seems like that's the way.
Yeah, because then people will feel that you're not just favoring one group.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's been 25 years since the Beijing Women's Conference. What have you seen internationally and here in the States about the status of women, how it's changed or not?
Well, I
changed?
think, interestingly enough, I think that women in other countries have gotten more political power in terms of their vice head of countries. They are prime ministers. They're finance ministers. We don't see that surprisingly as much in the United States. That's my opinion. We have some mayors, and there might be one or two governors, but not like you see there. We did get an increase in Congress, but they have major increases. Look at Finland, like the whole government on the top level is female. We don't have that. I feel as if we've got far more education for women. Women have taken statuses in companies that they didn't have before, and you find them sitting in places that you haven't seen before. But the difference is they do feel they have the right to demand it more.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
We both have daughters,
Yes.
and I think that our daughters have inherited a little bit of a different perspective on what they can demand or
yes.
expect than
Yes.
certainly we had.
Yeah,
As
I see
kids.
that very much different from my daughter, even though, people, she just thinks that things are naturally should be there.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you have, this seems, I look at things and I think, wow, that's great. And she'll be like, well, what's so great about it? It's just ordinary. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we started off talking about sort of you had to work on having peace in your own heart before you could really work for peace. And I'm also always just in awe of your ability as a singer, and wondering to what extent does music play into your world in being peaceful?
It has played a lot in my world, and I think part of that is coming out of the civil rights movement, because so much of that was sung, there was always songs that went with it and music, and it was a way to really empower you and keep you moving, as well as it spoke from your heart, and it was a lot of them were coming out of spirituals and gospel music. And I felt as if music for me has become a part of it. I will sing. I've sung songs places. I think the most moving was in Croatia. I was working. We had, after 10 years after the end of the Balkan War, the United Nations decided to let Pax Christi International run peace groups.
Wow.
And what they did is they brought all the peace people who had been working on the ground, because they had been working with peace people in all the different countries. But this was the first time they were going to meet each other. So in other words, this is the first time enemies were going to be in the room with the same people. You know, because they came from all over, and they came to Croatia, to a place called Vukovar. We were there, and one of the things that happened was that, yeah, I thought I was going to be an observer. That was what I was told.
Uh-huh.
So I'm looking at their schedule, and I said, "Oh, I see you're having a group, women as peacemakers. Who's running that?" And they said, "You are." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even come prepared." So we sat down, and I went through exactly how I feel women are. Women, wherever they are, want food for their children, shelter, education, medical care. You can almost name it. It's the same. I don't care. So I said, you need to get together over tea and coffee, and just call an area meeting and do that. And of course there were translators, because people spoke. People were Croatian, Serbian, and different languages. And so I sang them, "We are the ones that we've been waiting for." And I said, "We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for." So the translator was going to translate, and one woman said, "That
Got it.
got it." And when we were doing the report out, they insisted that the song be part of the report out, because they felt that had shaped that meeting and had moved them to understand that we could not wait for the bishops or the other men or anything. You had to start, and you could start simply over a cup of tea and a cup of coffee.
Wow. It's a wonderful story. And Beatrice, we're out of time just about. Is there anything that you would like to say before we close?
Well, I have to say that I have been here, as I said, since 1998, and I've met wonderful people like you, and here and there I meet different people. But part of the big thing that Vermont did for me, besides work that I did in Vermont, is it gave me a place to invigorate myself in peace. And when I came home, I could really look out my window at the mountains, relax, and take that in, so that I could go on to the next project. Because a lot of things, today, you're working from your home on computer. So I'm still working, but at least it gives me moments of peace. I can say, I'm turning that off now and enjoying the peace.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you
Thank you
much
so much
for being here. And thank you all for listening and watching. If the contact information from the organizations Beatrice talked about will show up in a minute. And I would encourage you, if you have a message that you'd like to get out to the public, if you're a nonprofit, you should call the people here at the station, because they're great. They really will help you figure out how to get that information out. Thanks.